We're going to have like a very conversational panel about the things that were discussed today at Google I/O. It's day 1 of I/O, you have to remember. So day 2 and 3 usually go into a little bit more technical detail. So it's going to be like high level, a little speculative. It's just supposed to be like a fun chat. So that said, the first half is going to be some prepared questions that we've come up with for the panelists. And then we're going to take questions from the audience and just kind of keep it light and, again, conversational. So without further ado here, I'd like to introduce Mark Rial. He's our moderator. You may have seen him from the over decade of events that he's been involved with. He's a pretty familiar face at this point. So take it away, Mark.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for everybody for showing up, and again, thanks for to Publicis for the venue. It's really cool to be able to put this on today. So as Jeff mentioned, we're going to lead off talking about the big 2019 Google Technology Conference that went on today, that hopefully all of you had a chance to take in or catch some of it. I feel like I'm surrounded by, like, I think I'm gonna walk out of here today just naturally more intelligent by osmosis. And I think we're going to, osmosis, that's how it works, right? Yeah. Okay. We're going to lead off, I guess, actually kind of like a combo opportunity for our esteemed panelists here to introduce themselves, and also just some initial reactions to the day. There's one microphone, don't fight over it, one on that side, one on that side. So I guess, yeah, a great place to start. If anybody wants to lead off anything particularly stand out over the course of the day, or anything that kind of stands out as the highlight of day 1 of Google I/O 2019. Don't rush. The mic's right there.
So, is it on? We good?
I think we're good.
Chuk. Yeah? Great. Hi, I'm Tamara. I'm a software engineer at TWG, just down the street from here. Mostly doing web development. And yeah, I feel like this is the year that they figured out we care about privacy, like for real, like actually, like we want that as a feature. The general public seems to actually have caught up to that. So yeah, a lot of the announcements were kind of around that and how they could achieve it, in my opinion. But yeah.
Hey guys, I'm Jigar. I work at Intersect. I'm a software engineer mainly working on Android. I'm similarly on similar sentiments. I think Google was today all about privacy, but I think Google is just trying to make a pretty picture here. But under the hood, they still want to read your Gmails to give you things, and so it's kind of a tricky situation. But they are trying to enforce on-device stuff. So let's see how it goes. As of now, things look like everything, like consumers are winning and developers are winning. But let's see how it goes.
Hi, my name is Esther. I'm also a software engineer. I work at Loblaw Digital, and privacy, definitely. But I think we're going in an era of machine learning and, trying to automate a lot of things. So from what I've seen them try to do is how to teach their machine to learn. But the problem that we're having right now is some level of biasness. So I'm really interested to see how they go forward with use cases to kind of deal with these kind of problems.
Left side of the panel.
Hey, I'm Steven, senior editor at XDA-Developers. My biggest takeaway from this was there was a really big focus on boilerplate. I know this wasn't quite the keynote thing, but there was a big focus on Jetpack, on Flutter, on trying to reduce boilerplate, on trying to make development a little bit easier. And while it doesn't get quite the mainstream billing for consumer-focused stuff, there was a lot announced, and I think we'll be able to dive into that a little bit today.
So hi, this is Jodie. So I'm the machine learning engineer at Dessa, and also the lecturer at U of T. So so what interests me here is more like, so Google released the BERT last year, which is amazing, and your results is actually pretty good at most of NLP problem. So that's one of the part. And the second part is they released the TensorFlow 2.0 earlier this year, which I'm trying to refresh myself to catch up with the 2.0. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I'm the managing editor of MobileSyrup. I think for us, because we're a very consumer-focused publication, some of the things that popped out for me were just the fact that the Nest Hub's finally coming to Canada, as well as the Pixel 3a. It's a pretty affordable option in terms of Android devices that are pretty capable. So yeah, those are the two big things for me.
Cool. So maybe I guess we could lead off. There definitely was a huge undertone regarding privacy throughout the day, and I guess like Tamara, you mentioned they're finally noticing that we care. Anything else that anybody like thinks is behind that? I mean, it doesn't seem to be that Google's the only organization that's really trumpeting that.
Facebook.
Why now? Why now?
Facebook.
The one reason.
No, I mean in general, like there's been a lot of press about privacy and like having control over your data, which is just something that I think for the last maybe 15 years of web, people didn't consider on a larger scale. I mean, in terms of whether or not they're actually, as you said, like putting data in the hands of the users in like the truest sense, I think is negligible, but yeah, it seems like that and the GDPR is probably a good reason for them to move forward with this and like at least optics-wise, really show that off and make a point of it. So.
So I think what is happening is Google has over the years has got a lot of personal data. So I think we are at this point where they really don't need personal data to improve their models. What they really need is the contextual data now. Like personal data they already had, like context and like from everything they have. And so I think now they are trying to probably showcase they really care about your personal data, so they don't need it anymore. But as the only thing they probably need is the contextual data. That's why there is this on-device machine learning models and the global machine learning models, which only contextually sync. And I think like Google, the way it works is like anything you want to use, you have to allow them all kind of your activities. For example, right now my Google Voice is disabled because I'm like a privacy freak, but that means I have to disable. Like if I want to allow just to speak to assistant, I have to give them location, I have to give them my web activities, my app activities, like freaking everything. So they're trying to say like you are under your control, but then if you want to use anything, all the cool stuff, you have to give us everything. So it's kind of tricky to just say that you are under your like private control, but you are kind of not as well. So
I think the one thing I'll just add to that is people need to understand that with web coming around whenever, like in the past few years and how it's actually developed, is we are technically getting it not for free. Data is how we pay for it. But it was something that was kind of in the backhands. We just blindly trusted and we were like, oh no, they'll do the right thing. And then we started realizing that they're doing the complete opposite. And now they're telling us that, okay, this is the currency that we're using to make things work the way you've liked it so far these few years. And in order for us to keep going forward, with all these laws that are kind of like blocking us from giving you what we've been getting, like giving us what we wanted and giving you what you wanted, it's not working anymore. So now we're telling you that this is how you have to pay for it. So I think it's kind of their way of coming out and saying, okay, we'll give you what you want, but you have to give us what we want.
Any reactions from the other side?
I mean, some of you already talked about it, but like from the perspective of an average consumer, it's on people's radars for the first time. I think privacy wasn't something people considered when they download a free app before now. They actually probably thought it was free. They didn't realize there was a personal data transaction going on. And I think with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, that's totally changed. It's now like my mom is concerned about privacy, and that's probably something that wasn't the case 5 years ago.
I think there's one additional thing that goes a bit beyond just what the public reaction is. I mean, yes, there definitely is a public reaction. That definitely is why they're pushing it to front and center. But I think, and I started seeing this in 2 years ago at Google I/O 2017, they seem to be starting to realize that with how close they're pushing Assistant to natural language and uncanny valley level territory, they really need to separate out that they're, or at least create a public appearance that they are protecting people's privacy and trying to not I guess, freak people out that way. Trying to kind of create a situation where people are okay with the weirdness.
And I guess like related to that, I guess just like the one follow-up, is the trade-off becoming upfront now? Like are the cards being laid on the table to allow consumers to make those decisions, or do you think that was conveyed as a part of today, or are we still lacking some of the convincing?
I'm skeptical. There was one cool feature that they announced where you can delete your data and set up automatic deletions after like 3 months or something, and like 100% that's gonna be a soft delete. Like there's no way that I don't think they're actually gonna really get rid of user data in the truest sense, because that's their bread and butter. So. And then like all of the like ML stuff that's on device now, which is powering a lot of their ability to be more privacy focused, because it's literally like the whole strategy is that all your, big data type processing is going to be happening on your device and then sending up aggregates to the cloud instead of like your data itself. But in the same vein, like they also announced a feature where it will scrape your Gmail to autofill like web app forms. So like it's a little incongruous, but yeah. Thoughts more? Not me. Somebody?
No, you're absolutely right. It's when they're saying that they're deleting stuff, I'd definitely be skeptical of how much it's deleting and how much it's anonymizing, how much it's taking it and creating maybe not a shadow profile, but something not tied to your actual profile directly.
For sure, still.
Yeah, I don't think they will be deleting like encrypted data from their secure data servers. Like that's never gonna happen. Like it's hard to believe when they say delete. Like they're just gonna pause it. Like it's really like hard to believe an encrypted data getting deleted from a company like Google, who basically earns money by that. Like, so, and I think there is now a clear line where there are people who are literally really against it, where they're like, they don't want to give anything because they know how Google works, and there are people who are now, they know like the data is going to be used, but they are now okay because they are probably so used to the services. So I think now the line is pretty clear. So like either there is no going away from it, or basically go away completely. So the line is clear now.
Cool.
You can be one of those people where you don't mind your watch because you don't do anything embarrassing.
Everybody's like that, right? Cool. So let's flip on. So one of the other topics that came up pretty repeatedly today as well is augmented reality. But it kind of feels like AR has been a headline topic several times in the last decade or so. And so, question now being, is this the year that AR is the thing, or is it a thing for some people that like are already within the fields that we're in? Is AR a thing now? Like, are the AR announcements today relevant to things that are being built in 2019?
I thought it was supposed to be a thing when Project Tango came out.
Supposed to be.
So my take on that is really interesting. Well, not really interesting, but it's just like, so they, okay, but it's like, so they did it this year, and I think I watched the Apple one last year, and if I kind of think back to that, as Apple really pushed their AR back then, and to me it feels like Google is jumping on that bandwagon right now, and now they're showing, because they had the power, they're just showing now their skills and their features that kind of like powers this through. Now I think it's becoming a more prominent thing because there's a sense of disconnection when someone goes onto their phone, and when they leave their phone, they're back in the real life. So with augmented reality, there's a couple of things that happen. You come up with a series of use cases that no one's ever touched on. And then also that sense of partial connection, I find, where it's like, you're not fighting something in a game in like just, a phone in the dark, gamer on Twitch, whatever you want to call it, but you're doing it in like the office, so there's a sense of partial connection that could be made there that brings the virtual to reality that can come off obviously with a lot of different use cases and different that could be handled there. And I think that Also, the one thing that they showed was like, the shark and, kind of having a proper visualization and being like, oh, if I was to ever get bitten or eaten by a shark, this is how big it would look like. Okay. But like, even with all of that, I think that going back to even depending on what type of person or you're like, for me, for example, when I learn, I'm a visual learner. So with that aspect of me, it's like, you can't just tell me things. I need to be able to understand and kind of visually see it. So even when it comes to the learning perspective of you being a doctor or whatever it is, it's like that's another possible open use case of being able to fully understand what you're trying to consume as knowledge by having it presented to you in a way that you can fully understand. So I think it's a very important place that we should definitely look into because of all the potentials that it has.
Any other thoughts on AR or the announcements today?
So I think what probably happened, like the way I look at it is, Google had this AR thing, like it's there since a while, but nobody really developed apps which are like really useful. So now Google is basically trying to build something on their own platform and saying you build something and our search will provide how you showcase. So basically it becomes like an app where you can basically create your models like education models or something, and Google basically built the app to show it. So no, I think Google basically waited until there is a market for it, but I don't think there is a market. Like Google has this, AR core, which is in the phones now, and Google now has this inbuilt in the search. So I think now Google is just trying to leverage people to use their stuff and showcase like the AR stuff. And the Google Maps is already using it now. So people are seeing the potential, which is not there as of now. Like there is no popular app you can say, oh, you want to use AR? Download this app. There is no app. So Google is just trying to showcase by taking on their hands.
I think the biggest thing for me with AR is like even apps that I've written about that have AR features, I always download them, I use them, maybe I'll write a story about them, and then I never touch them again. So for me, it's like that use case has never really been found where it makes sense. And I often come back to like, I know Pokemon Go is a horrible implementation of AR.
Maybe it's not.
But that was kind of like the moment, and the only one that I can really think of where the average person knew what augmented reality is, and they were using an app that featured it. Beyond that, I haven't really seen like an app that someone wants to use that features AR, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like it feels like there aren't a lot of like tech applications for things that actually integrate with our lived environments in that scope, which is what AR would be good for. Like we just don't have that. Like Pokemon Go is a weird outlier, and that's kind of it. So the other examples I've seen of AR tend to be like, here's a thing of a guy dancing on your table. Like it's gimmicky, but.
I think that there was an app that came out in maybe 2010 where you could like hold your phone to the night sky and it would tell you all the like constellations and stuff. But that came out like 9 years ago.
It's still maintained, the Google Sky Map. Although it's now maintained by a university because Google stopped maintaining it themselves. But no, that's exactly it. There definitely is the potential for a killer app from AR. There is potential for something that's to come out that will make everyone want to download AR and make it actually be useful. And maybe it's something that we've already tried and just haven't done well enough yet. But until we find that, it's going to keep being gimmicky. It's going to keep being not quite there. And then someone's going to find something, I think, because it's definitely has potential, but just not execution.
And also don't forget, whenever people use AR for anything to do with maps and showing people this, they are going to use Google Maps, Google Places API. So at the end, it's still Google's benefit, like the way they showcase maps. Like you have to use Places API to get those places and show them. So.
Another focus of the day in various aspects was different types of accessibility features within Google products. Does anything particularly of that vein stand out today or draw any excitement or things that in terms of immediate application into the real world you feel like it's ready to go? Any particular products stand out or announcements stand out today in that regard?
So I think Google's Android Dev Summit happened, I think, 5 months ago, and they had an accessibility talk there. The problem they found is so they basically got developers' feedback based on like how hard and easy some of the accessibility options are, and the hardest ones were like related to like video apps where the captions were missing, and they were really hard to build. Easier one was like labeling missing and talkbacks and things like that, which developers could do. But one of the hardest ones in the graph was the captioning, and that probably Google solved today by introducing the live caption. So I think that would be a really great piece, because you can have any video, even like video recorded on your phone, and then Google will auto like caption them. So I think that takes a huge amount from video app developers. So I think that's a killer feature.
I think my one take on that, being a person who wasn't born or raised in Canada, is it's a good thing that they added this caption, but it's like with every use case or every solution that you have, it's like, how much research did you actually do? Like, how far out of your comfort zone did you go? So for something like that that's works seamlessly here in North America, it's like, did you test it in Africa? Did you test it in other places where they don't have these abilities and they probably need the services more than we do? So like the one conversation I was actually having, I think was it with Jeff afterwards, was like, captions is really interesting, but I'll give you a perfect case scenario. Every single time I watch Live PD, because my mom loves Live PD, and someone is getting caught for like having marijuana or whatever, and she's like, what did they get caught for? What happened? Because her first language is French and it's in English. So I have to be the translator, right? So it's like, okay, so you do this live captioning. It's like, are you going to add the ability to translate real time from English to French? Like, is that going to be a thing? Are you going to take into consideration dialects? Like there's Belgian French, which is what I speak. And then there's French, and then there's Quebecan French. It's like, with these abilities to go as far beyond your spectrum of what you know or what you feel you're going to not just make a system, you're going to make an efficient, reliable system that everyone is is part of. Is like, you thought of me too when you made this. So overall, I think it's a good idea. It's a good solution. But as a person who comes from a place where these kind of things, we rely on us being considered, I'm very interested to see how far they actually go with their research and use cases.
I think that's exactly what Google's targeting with this. I don't know how long it'll take them to get there. I don't know, it could be a long time, but that's exactly what they're showing off with the Google Lens for the live translates, what they're trying to do with the live transcribe. It seems like a logical next step to combine them together into one. It could be a very long time until it's actually at the level people need it to be, but it's definitely where they're headed.
I guess maybe related to that could be a good segue into, I guess, just in general talking about announcements today related to machine learning. Anything in particular? So I guess one of the themes from last year it definitely seemed like a lot of pushing of attention towards TensorFlow and related Google machine learning tools. Anything from today stand out? I do recall last year some of the aspects of like pushing for developer adoption into TensorFlow and machine learning seemed to be a big thing. Anything today that was cause for excitement from a machine learning aspect?
TensorFlow is great. So, because we're trying to using deep learning, bring to any kind of enterprise solutions. But the thing is, we feel like the real data science or data analytics people doesn't actually know how to adopt the deep learning in the production. So that's why there is a block. Even correctly using TensorFlow, there's also a block in most of the enterprise solutions. So I do see the power for the TensorFlow 2.0. But we need more knowledge to be taught how to using TensorFlow or even deep learning in the practical project. So, but I see everybody now is picking up these kind of online courses, trying to get more understanding about deep learning, which is great. So I'm very expecting. Yes.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting. It seems to be a bit of a common refrain. So machine learning being one of them, and I think the push for IoT and hardware was another one where there was a lot of announcements and excitement, a lot of online courses that would kind of teach you the basics. but then like to actually do anything with any practical application, like it's a bit of a leap to take it to take it in there. That being said, though, some of the announcements where today, and I guess like the segue from the accessibility piece is that a lot of their machine learning, I guess, is going into some of Google's own products. Does Google's implementation of these evoke any excitement that there is things opening for machine learning, or even new product possibilities, or even opportunities for developers to learn in those areas?
I mean, yeah, Google's definitely pushing for that. I mean, they know that there's not enough knowledge of machine learning out there. There's not enough skilled professionals there, and they're pushing to try and create the tools so that people can more easily get into it, more easily learn it. And they were demoing ML Kits classifier, I think, or at least they were talking about it in some of their blog posts today. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to push forward the ability for people to get into machine learning more easily, to get started, to get learning, and to get to the point where they can start actually developing themselves, start being machine learning professionals.
Is there a feeling that barriers like becoming more achievable for developers?
So I think it's not going to be easy because there is one thing which is the machine learning outside the mobile device, which she's talking about. So I think which are basically specifically for machine learning specialists or machine learning engineers. And another thing which Google is trying to push is basically ML Kit, or something which you basically do in your app using the on-device machine learning capability. But I think Google, like, it's far away from that, because what Google really provides and try to do is like providing you app actions so that developers can, tangle things in your app, and then Google basically shows you something in search actions and things like that. But Google announced it last year, and I was reading some developer feedbacks, and they only have 7 actions. And those 7 actions is probably out of what Google did with those 50 companies which Google shows off. So like that's not gonna have, like, that's not mass. Like you're talking about, like, targeting billions of people in like India and Brazil, like, which is the emerging, like, your user community. Like, people are not really focusing, Google is also not focusing for them in terms of machine learning. So I think it's probably far away from what Google is trying to pitch right now. I don't know how long it's gonna take. I hope the Udacity courses, which they will keep launching, might help. So probably let's see.
So like one thing though is like shout out to how small they compressed their ML Kit libraries and everything this year. Like again, a lot of their privacy features that they were really plugging seem to rely very heavily on their own internal usage of these tools, and like being able to do a lot of data processing per device, and instead of in the cloud and having to send like your raw data first. So over and above whether or not it's going to be developer friendly for us to use and for us to implement similar toolkits, they seem to be internally adopting it to like a pretty high degree. So we'll see if that influences the rest of us more. Yeah.
I think so. The only thing that I'll probably bring is, so I've played around with the ML Kit, and I'm actually trying to build an app around it. I think the one thing that I can see that like with it and machine learning is actually helping with is opening Pandora's box of what you can do with your apps, right? It's like, for someone who may have accessibility problems, or, they need to scan something and have something said, or, it's not, you're right, like it's not there. Like even when I think about it, like you have to like educate, like what you get in ML Kit is the outcome of what it learns. Like that's you getting the end product, right? But what it is, it's like a different thing altogether. But that end product on the developer side, for let's say you building some sort of app that helps them scan I don't know, a sign, and then it tells you what it is or whatever it is. It's for the consumer side of things. As a developer, it's a good thing that we have these tools. We may not fully understand it as developers. We may not understand where it's going to go or what it's going to do for us, but it's just another amazing tool that has been compressed for us and we don't have to deal with, that can help our consumers be happy. Because at the end of the day, it's a consumer-facing app. It's a consumer-facing company. So yes, there needs to be a much better level of education. But I think right now it's like they're focusing on let's make the customers happy first, and then we'll deal with the developers later. But so I think that would be probably my take on that.
So yeah, I think that's what I was saying. I think for developers, like it's even the Android itself, like it's evolving very fast. For us, it's really hard to keep up with this. And now on top of it, like asking a developer to learn MLKit, unless they are interested, which is I'm not sure how many developers will be. And I think that's the primary reason why the smart replies has been inbuilt. Because smart replies to your notification, it's there. Like if you want to build yourself. Like if you have an app, you get a notification, you can build smart replies if you can build your own machine learning. But Google is now coming up with their own because they know it's so difficult to build something like this. So that's why I say for developers, like it's really far from today to build something on their own, unless they're like multi-millionaire big companies.
Any other observations on that? And so I guess maybe one last piece related to that. This kind of ties a few things together. We talked a bit at the beginning about there was a lot of privacy stuff, and like how convincing was it? In this same area here, they did specifically take some time to tackle the idea of bias when it comes to machine learning. You talked a little bit about that at the beginning, Esther. So in this context, so we have the idea of them trying to like use machine learning in various systems to like allow better predictions when people are typing. We talked about the accessibility part. By virtue of the fact that they even brought it up, is that a step forward? Or do we feel that they were convincing in their intent regarding that? Any thoughts or observations about that?
So what I would like to see is the data in some sort of summary that brought them to the conclusion. Now, the conclusions they're coming to is not bad, it's great, but it's one of many cases from people of different backgrounds or different cultures. So what I was even talking about, they actually did a showing of how the machine learning kind of like, so the beginning part is they have a machine, they're teaching the machine how to do things, how to recognize that, you know, it's about to rain, how to recognize that someone is a doctor. So the one that they showed was a doctor, and what it was like a white male, white coat, white male, white coat. And that's how the machine identified as a doctor, right? So to me, it's like they even brought it up. It's like there is so many cases when you leave your environment, and I keep emphasizing this because it's very interesting coming from a different perspective. So it's like taking it a couple of step backs. Machine learning to me is like them trying to build a perfect AI. We are imperfect people trying to build a perfect system. How does imperfect people build a perfect system? So it's like you have to, even if it's the little case in like Bangladesh, that one kid that you thought wasn't relevant in any case, he's still a case. So to me, it's like I want to see what kind of summary that you're putting together to find that these are the equivalent of great solutions. They might be the most majority, I'm okay with that, but you can't disregard everything else, because if you're trying to build a perfect non-biased system, it has to include everybody. So kudos to them for what they've done, but to me, what I've seen so far is like they get to a point and they're like, this is the majority, we're done. I want to see more from that. And I think I will give props to Google, because I was reading an article some time back that they opened up like a Google AI system in West Africa in Ghana, where I actually lived. So I'm like, okay, this is amazing, because then now you've exposed yourself to a completely different environment that you know nothing about, like absolutely nothing about. And now your system, your machine learning system, is now going to learn something of a brand new environment, different cultures, different religions, different food, all that kind of stuff. But it's like, in order for you to build that perfect AI, you literally have to go to the ends of Amazon and freaking Alaska with the North Pole and that white bear. All of them have to be included for you to have that non-biased system. Everyone has to be recognized.
So I think there are two pieces why they brought it up. I think similar to what we brought up regarding the privacy, like it's now known to everyone. I think similarly the bias in machine learning is now getting like out on people. Like last year, I think the Amazon had the HR issue where the HR system like was completely biased, and then the news came out, and then it was loaded up the whole news. So I think now Google is basically trying to be like ahead of the game by saying that we are trying to tackle bias and we are aware about it. before any of the Google thing come out as a bias. I think they're just trying to make sure that we are working on it and we know that this is an issue, and we are like, and I think their efforts are positive, because there are also lots of working on the medical medical system and trying to find the cures to and find basically the diseases. So I think they are on positive side, on like they at least are getting aware that there is a bias and we are trying to tackle it.
Any other thoughts on? So I guess just switching over, just I guess dealing with some like imminent technologies, and I guess like some of the most immediate practical applications of things. So in regards to Android and the in-app updates, so being able to push new features and being able to push critical fixes hasn't been smoother, I guess, and easier for people now. And that being something that's imminent, does that evoke any interest, or is that kind of stuff currently ongoing, or any thoughts about that, or any excitement around that area?
So, speaking of pushing updates, there was actually I was talking on Thursday with Chet, and there's one particularly interesting thing that came up that I don't think they've applied it fully to the level that I hope that they'll eventually apply it, but it still will be interesting. And that was the ability to push updates for critical updates quickly for apps, including giving the users notifications of whether or not they want to reboot the app immediately or delay it until they next open the app. Which I mean, that's a bit of a pain, because historically has been a bit of a pain, because apps would just shut down when they're updated. But so they haven't pushed it into the regular update mechanism. That will still reboot apps, but and I know they're mostly focused on the fact that you can push updates rapidly to users in order to fix major issues. But the fact that they're actually giving users the option to delay the update instead of just immediately crashing the app and pushing the update through is it's nice to see. It's improvement that I hope they bring over to the regular updates as well.
Any other thoughts about?
So I think it is a second year where they are trying to basically do. There is a Project Treble they introduced last year, where the other device OEMs basically try to get a faster update from Google and then try to incorporate that. And I think this is a second step on top of it, where Google will basically update the lower level like APIs directly from like a app install. And I was reading a blog from Google, and they're saying they'll just, whenever you reboot your phone, they'll just automatically update it. So it's like we use, like Apple or Windows, where you restart and then you see like it's installing on your ROM or something. I think something similar might happen, where they will automatically like try to install stuff while you reboot the system. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, they're definitely doing a lot with the A and B partitions to be able to do seamless updates on reboots. And I know they're also pushing a lot with the modularizing parts of Android. This kind of broke earlier this year with talk about the GSIs and being able to potentially, although I don't think they've actually finally announced this, do stuff with installing GSIs onto non-bootloader unlocked devices. But it seems they're taking steps towards that and using that functionality in the modularization of Android OS, with being able to push updates to, say, camera or security or different subparts individually, even core OS parts. Yeah.
Cool. So I guess one last question. We'll go around the table before we open up to audience questions. Any glaring omissions today, or any disappointments? Was anything anybody was anticipating that didn't? Just reaching for the mic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was pretty excited to learn more about was Stadia. That was something our readers were really into. I wanted to hear something about pricing, minimal bandwidth required for it to actually work properly. I think they probably didn't talk about that because they did a whole conference dedicated to it, but it would have been nice to have a little bit of more information about what Stadia is all about.
I think the whole AOT things is probably gone, like from Google's like high priority. So Android things is basically nowhere near found. Like, and Google also probably stopped public API support for that. So that was something kind of step
A
back.
lot of developers disappointed
Yeah,
by that.
a step back.
I wanted them to plug Flutter more so that I can plug Flutter more.
Anything you want to say about Flutter?
It's great. It's really easy to use. It's fun.
That's actually one thing that keeps surprising me. I've seen more briefings on Flutter than anything else Google has ever put out.
And they barely talked about it.
Yeah, like they're no, I'm not kidding. We spent as much time talking with Tim Sneath as we did with about just Flutter, as we did talking with Chet about Android's Q as a whole and Jetpack and everything else like that. It's honestly amazing how much effort Google's putting into getting information about Flutter out in press briefings and stuff like that. But they're glossing over some massive stuff for the actual presentation. It like I on the briefing that we no so we only
Very
had
very
time to-
passionate opinions about Flutter here.
I love it too.
The no
Yeah. Oh,
It's really good.
I know.
that we put together for Flutter. It should not have been a single article. We should have been broken out into multiple, but we didn't have time. And we absolutely had to bury the lead quite a bit. One of the most exciting things that, in my opinion, that was announced today that didn't really get touched on was the fact that you now, as of when the stuff today finally fully launches in stable, we'll be able to develop for mobile, web, and desktop all on one device with natively on one device with a Chromebook, because you'll have the full Linux support with Flutter, full mobile support with Flutter, embedded device too, but you can't run that natively on the Chrome OS device, and web support from Flutter, and you can you can develop for them all natively on Chrome OS, compile them all natively on Chrome OS, run them natively on Chrome OS, and test and everything.
Unless it's iOS.
I guess it shows that Android instead of mobile.
Mac is bad.
But yeah,
Also, what happened to Angular? It's around still.
It's still around.
They
People
didn't
love
tell
it.
me anything about it.
Any other gaps today?
I'm still waiting for my Pixel Watch.
Any excitement over the so I mean this conference used to be all about consumer facing stuff and people getting excited about new devices. This year there was an announcement. Anybody impressed?
It's cheap enough for me to buy, so I mean, because like every phone that you can think of, and that's the one thing they were pretty right about. Even when you do the conversion, because American, it's Canadian, it's probably gonna be like 520 something, and they did do like a nice side-by-side shot between like an iPhone X and oh, there you go, look at how dark that is. And I just have an iPhone 8 Plus. Sorry, I'm an Android developer, I feel very bad, so I'm switching over to Pixel 3a when it comes out because it's affordable, because every other phone is like $1,000 or $1,100. So it's what? It's out. Oh, great. And well, I'm
Looks like we
switching
got a
over
sale.
tonight, I guess. But like, yeah, no, I think, that's good that they're thinking of the people on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to prices, because I think that, when it came to like phone devices and where we were, I mean, we came from like Nokia 3310, loved that thing. And I'm not going to lie, like they did kind of brag about the battery, and I was like, you need to get us back where we were with Nokia 33, because they were like, oh, you charge it for this long and you get like 2-hour battery. I'm like, I charged it one time and I got 2 days worth of battery out of Nokia. So get us back there first. But like on top of that, it's just like, we went up the spectrum with like pricing and, and with them kind of making all those innovations of making things smaller, hopefully things are less costly because of sizes. Hopefully we start to go down the spectrum with like everything, not just like a special phone that's made for special people. Like everything needs to start coming down there, because obviously I do think that the way that our prices of devices are right now is kind of ridiculous. So I'm happy that it's not that much. They're starting somewhere, so.
So I have a different take on this, a positive take. So so I've been anti-Google all day today, but I think I think there is a problem of, especially, I think US is kind of more saturated with like Apple versus high-end Android, like Samsung phones. But if you go back to India or Brazil or Indonesia, I think the problem is there are cheap manufacturers who basically launch a device once a year with a fixed OS level, like for example Android 7 or 8, and then the next year they will launch the new phone with a similar price range with the next OS. And I think what Pixel's new phone might push is basically everyone on that to basically stop that scam. Because Google will provide 3 years of support software, and people love Google's vanilla Android. So this will push other manufacturers, if they want to be in the game, to push updates as well. And that's a win for developers at the end, because we'll have more people using newer versions of Android, and at the end probably less OS fragmentation. So I see this as a long-term huge benefit in terms of having a cheap Pixel phone, because a lot of people will be, probably not in US, Canada, but lots of people outside west side of the world, I think people will be buying this, and then this will be a tough competition for like Oppo and OnePlus and all the Chinese manufacturers who are giving cheap phones. But people will be like, oh, it's a Google phone, I can show off, and it's cheap, it's latest OS for 3 years. I think it's a developer win at the end.
Nice.
I just gonna say I thought it was cool that there's finally like a mid-range Android phone that's really worth buying. It's been a while since one of those has existed. In a way, it's kind of a return to like the Nexus line without the name. That's how we sort of framed our coverage of it. Phones are really expensive in Canada, especially after the exchange rate. So like a lot of high-end phones are out of the reach of a lot of people. And the 3A has a lot of the Pixel 3's really good features, especially the camera that you can see up there. So, I mean, you're getting a lot for not a ton of money. It's still pretty expensive, I think, but it's more reasonably priced for sure than the Pixel 3 or like anything that Apple's released in the last couple of years.
Cool. Some comments?
Yeah, no, you can definitely, as you're saying, you can get the similar hardware for half the price with like a Xiaomi or Redmi Note 7 Pro or something like that, but the software is not the same. It's night sight and stuff like that makes a difference.
That's a $1,000 phone, so I don't know if you want to do a comparison with
Yeah, I gotta say,
I can't compare it with that because that's not.
I can't wait to see iPhone sales this year competing with the 3A, because like iPhone's whole business model seems to be like fuck the little guy these days. So we'll see if like regular people will just like buy enough of these to really tip the scales.
I think sorry, just the one last take to all of this would be the one thing that's going for Apple is their little ecosystem that they suck you in, and unfortunately I've been sucked in. I want to get out, but once Google kind of like
You can do it.
It's hard.
We're here for you. We're here for you.
It's like cutting cigarettes and alcohol and everything at the same time. It's just a really bad thing to see. It's like going pure cold turkey. Don't make me do it.
We're going to start a support group or something.
I know we need an Apple support group, but just overall, it's like two things. We need to, if Google makes this ecosystem where it's an open-ended ecosystem where, you know, everyone can kind of come in and give back to it, that would be amazing, and that would go against Apple. And the second thing is, for the price of this phone, I would like to see us get to the point where we see this kind of price phone and be like, oh man, that's the high-end expensive phone, and then everything else is in like the 200 whatever range. Like, this is where we should be. We shouldn't be seeing this as cheap. We should be seeing this as the high-end expensive area, and I'm hoping that we get there soon.
Cool. So I think we'll wrap our prepared questions. Just a quick round of applause for our esteemed panelists. And we still do have some time, so I guess we can open it up to audience questions if there is any burning questions. We got one over here at the back.
So this is for everybody, including Mark.
I didn't come here to answer questions.
That's a shame. You can go last. If based on what you saw today, is there anything that they announced that you're going to be using or is going to affect your day-to-day work or your day-to-day flow, how you deal with Android or GCP or anything you do with Google products.
Lazy loading images was pretty cool. Even if it's only for Chrome, that's pretty cool.
Really? Definitely. Like I said, I'm on the ML kit train right now, and they have like this product recognition that they have an example with IKEA. And I think that we're getting to a place, unfortunately, where computers get smart and people not so much. So having these extra abilities where you can help them identify things would be great, and someone could turn it into this educational kind of knowledge where of like, this is a plant, please remember that this is a plant, and then you can kind of like use their ML kit abilities to kind of go forward and have it kind of identify what product and inventory you have. So definitely ML kit for me.
So immediate use, I think Android Studio, the 3.5, and I think I'm really impressed with the whole Android Studio updates recent days, and I'm in love with emulator as well, the new one, and I've been using it. So I think I'm really positive about, and probably start using it tomorrow. So Android Studio probably the takeaway for immediate use.
I will also say that like Kotlin being really pushed harder this year for Android in general is like really lowering the barrier for other developers to get into it. Like my background is mostly web, and I've done Flutter and React Native sort of projects, so soft Android. But it's nice to see that they're trying to make it more developer friendly, and they're trying to get rid of Android.
No,
Java. They're trying to get rid of Java. That's what I'm being whispered. No more Java.
No, and that's exactly what I was going to say as well. Outright they're saying that they're really pushing Jetpack. They're pushing Kotlin first development there, and there's some crazy stats too. Something like I think it was 80% of the top 100 apps all are using some Jetpack components. And I mean, okay, that may not. I'm not going to do development with that myself because I'm not an Android app developer, but I guarantee you that within the next probably half year, some app that I'm using is going to use the Camera X library. It's going to be a massive boon for any application that tends to integrate camera functionality, and it'll provide backward and forward compatibility all the way from Lollipop to whatever Google does in the future. And that's just one Jetpack library alone. It's going to reduce boilerplate. It's going to reduce the amount of the difficulty of getting apps up and running. It's going to make it easier to make it a smooth camera experience, smooth experience with whatever they're doing with Jetpack.
So as a machine learning engineer perspective, so what I can see is like, so the new Google AI is trying to build more like a practical data set, like public health data set, which is hard to get, like as MLE, if it doesn't have any resources. So they are trying to emerging these kind of user cases and helping the people who are interested to push like the cancers predictions and trying to benefit the people. I think that's great. And it's like, it benefits us to play with the TensorFlow and trying to see how that's going to improve the predictions, which is nice.
For me, it was the Nest Hub. I've been waiting for a smart display that's Google Assistant powered that doesn't suck for a really long time. So I'm excited to get my hands on one and play around with it.
Keen, what would you say? Let's throw the question back at you.
I didn't expect to be put on the spot. I know how Mark feels. As an Android developer, it's probably the Jetpack stuff too. Anyone that's implemented Camera 2 knows how much that sucks.
No, and that's the thing. Camera 2 was marketed originally as being a massive improvement in ease of use for camera. A little while ago. No, it was Lollipop. So Android 5.0.
They also introduced a new wrapper probably last year for the camera, which probably never worked out.
HAL 3 add-on to Camera 2. This looks like it's going to be another massive step forward for it.
Yeah, so I mean, the keyword that you said there was Camera 2 was marketed. So any developers that aren't putting the in-app update is going to be shooting themselves in the foot. And something they didn't announce during the keynote, but they announced a little bit after, was the Jetpack Compose library, which looks like it's going to be Flutter in Kotlin, pretty much. So like I'm looking forward to all like the Jetpack stuff coming up.
It's basically a declarative UI. So basically, you can say text and bracket hello world, and then it will print. It will basically convert that into a text view. So we are basically seeing Flutter in Kotlin, and it's going to be in AOSP. So everyone's gonna see it. So it's gonna be fun.
Great. Any other questions?
Questions from the audience? One over here.
You can also ask the audience for questions. We could get crazy. We could steal one of their mics. I don't know.
Yeah, it was brought up about the lazy loading of images. Like, some of us are from an age where we remember a day when there were two different web browser standards. You know, there were two different versions of HTML, two versions of JavaScript, and being a web dev, I mean, you had to accommodate both formats. Now we've sort of come to an age where everybody seemed to agree on the JavaScript on the HTML.
IE11 is still out there.
But now we have Chrome introducing like lazy loading of images. Do you think it's just going to be one tag, or do you think we're heading again to a world where Chrome's going to start introducing a whole bunch of HTML extensions just for the Chrome browser? Like, you think it'll just stop at the lazy loading, or do you think this could be sort of a slippery slope here?
What other browsers? They're all Chromium now.
but okay, so my only take on that, so I used to be a front-end developer, and I remember I had this one particular problem where I literally told myself, I hate you, Chrome. And and it was one of those, like, being able to load an image in partial sections that are being said through the server, so it needed to be able to determine how to read it, and it was like you needed to add something in the header. However, like Mozilla and Safari, oh, they played nice. Even I think Internet Explorer played nice. It was just Chrome that was acting up. So with lazy loading, it's great for Chrome. Like, you still have to deal with it. To my understanding, it's not like they're like, hey, this is lazy loading. We've just shared it with Mozilla, Firefox, and Safari, so you're golden. It's still just for Chrome. So I think from a perspective of, if I was thinking, hey, as a front-end developer, is this good for me? Yeah, it's good for that. If it was a cross-browser feature, that would be literally a thing I would have a party at Young and Dundas about. But it's just one browser, and they may have the majority, but there's all these other guys that, I mean, a lot of these other banks and stuff like that still use like IE Explorer, and so you're still stuck in this place where only one person is solving their problems or something. Like, you're still like, should I be happy, or should it be like, now my manager's gonna come to me and be like, add that tag for laser loading. Yeah, add it to Safari and Firefox too. It's like, I don't, like, how do you deal with that? Because you still have to have the fallbacks, right? So.
I can't wait for lazy loading and links.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I think it's super cool, and I love the idea of just throwing a tag on, or like a data attribute on your image tag, and like, boom, there you go. But like, I mean, I only saw what the keynote presented today, so I'm guessing that it's going to be like harder than that. That it's going to work weirdly with reactive frameworks, because most data attributes do for some fucking reason. And that, like, again, it's only Chrome and V8. Unless they somehow share like a polyfill, which they said nothing about. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. Like, so, and that's kind of how they have been treating Chrome and the web as well. So I totally get what you mean about the browser wars. I think we all learned our lesson. Like, we're all terrified of that still. So hopefully this will be like open source or something, and we can all smash it into other browsers. But we'll see.
All right. Any other questions from the audience?
Cool. I guess like maybe we touched on the Home Hub a little bit today as well. Any other thoughts or excitement around any of the stuff that was announced for the in-home things?
As a developer, I like to be able to have access to things that you would think that Google would not give you access to. So they did give access to like being able to develop on the Home Hub, and like being able to create apps for it, because like it's like they're like, yeah, let us try it out first. Okay, it's good. Okay, we're gonna give you this much access, because I think they said that you can only like get a canvas, and then through that canvas you can only make a game. So it's like you're still limited to what you can and cannot do. But I do like that they're becoming open source-ish with their stuff. So I think that's good to allow us to kind of play with it and kind of give back. So that would be, from a developer's perspective, that would be my take on that.
I mean, I honestly am. So I didn't. I'm full disclosure. I didn't get to see the full Home Hub bit, so I'm not. I may have missed something, but I honestly didn't see anything that really seemed more than just an evolutionary step forward from the Lenovo Smart Display. Okay, it's got a better camera. It's got a better speaker. It's a little bit faster, but it seems to be just the next small progression of it. I'm not seeing anything that's really driving it to the next level.
You can flip it off to turn it off.
You can do it. You can.
Whoa.
This Lenovo one's got the hardware shutter for the camera and all that stuff. I get the excitement about it, but at the same time, I'm not. I kind of don't get the excitement about this particular product. I get the excitement about it eventually, just not yet. If that makes sense. I get the excitement about it last year.
Last thing I just want to add, I think, because I like to dabble in everything, obviously, I think the one thing that would be super cool if they kind of just, and this goes back to your IoT and how they've stopped, and I didn't know that, I'm livid. So there is such a push, because they're having a smart city right here at Waterfront. They're building a smart city, right? Which is going to use this entire system. I mean, I don't know how much of it is going to be smart, or whatever it is. But to me, it's like, I would like to see them kind of like start investing in sensors, because they have this like Eddystone system that they use that nobody will know of unless they do research of, but is so integrated into what we do on our daily basis, and it's not being pushed. So the reason why I brought it up in the home structure, because like they have this whole like Nest system that they've kind of rebranded, and this is our tools, this is what you can use, and it's like there is really nothing there aside from like UI interfaces through the hub or some assistant. Like there's nothing there with like sensor devices that they're kind of putting together that people could like, because if you go into like sensors and you wanted to install it in your house and you wanted to build it with Android Studio, you're still going through a third party, right? So I would like to start seeing them in a way develop devices that are kind of both consumer and developer first, because a lot of the stuff we've seen are consumer first and is built using a developer's hand. But when you have those two together, it's like we can kind of go forward and build use cases for it and be like, this is what we can use it for, and the consumer can benefit from it. So that's where I would like to see them go with their devices.
Have they eroded the developer trust in that though? Because I mean, when you think about like there was, for better or worse, there was plenty of excitement around Google Glass, and a lot of developers were not done with it, right? Like that pissed off developers. Project Tango, that winding that down, that pissed off developers, because and like I can't recall what the announcement was this year, but some of the backlash was like, there's no way I'm investing my time and any of my money into this new product, because there's Stadia.
Stadia was like, as soon as Stadia was announced, some of the top comments were, well, Google's just going to abandon it like Hangouts. And they referenced all these Google products that have been like Google Plus shut down right before Stadia was announced.
Right.
And somehow Google Plus had that many fans where they rallied against Stadia, I guess.
Right. And actually, I mean, to be honest, like to open up that to any feedback in the audience, but like how at a new announcement for a developer thing, like how eager is anybody to jump into the next thing?
So I think Google is basically realizing this shit is like really difficult. Like they just like randomly throw out ideas and then start building like Project Tango and things like that. But like, and then they realize that no one can build it, because even we can't build it like top class. So and then eventually things fail. So I think that's also the same thing is happening with, as I said, like machine learning. Like people can't build like top class quality stuff. Even if they have idea, like they can't transform that into a machine learning app, which basically will go to a home hub or something. So that's why Google is basically building the whole ecosystem and just providing you like hooks that, okay, you can just give us an action and then we'll still do the search, because people are used to doing search. And then if you say song, then Spotify will show up. So they are basically trying to do something where there is so much less work for developers, and because it's hard to build, and then Google will do the rest. So that's why it's basically getting that's why the projects are getting shut off, especially the hardware level project, and the rest, whenever Google realizes, they just build by themselves.
Does anybody from the audience have anything to add to that series of questions in that discussion? Nope.
I think Google's one of the few companies that's blessed with the fact that they could create 100 projects, kill 99% of them, just have one and do just fine. Like most companies, to launch one project and then abandon it is like the death of the company. So I think we have to accept the fact that Google, as a rule, just throws a lot of stuff at the wall just to see what sticks. And I think in the last few years, with the change to Alphabet and everything, they've gone a little more like their their X or whatever their code labs. They killed a lot of stuff that way. So I think now it's a lot more either it makes money or it doesn't. And if it's not making money, it's dead. So,
but I mean, to some extent, just fine's not good enough. Having one project do just fine out of 100. If for an internal project that outside developers aren't getting invested in and aren't spending their time learning, okay, that's fine. It's not affecting other people. But when you're putting something out there and saying, hey, come use this, try this, get invested in this community, and then a year or two later you shut it down, that's going to annoy people. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think also from the hardware portion of it, I feel like when they're thinking of okay, so should we build this software? I feel like they would lead more to do it because all they gotta do is shut down some server and wipe out some data. But then when they're building a physical device, it's we gotta stop actual production of this physical device that we're getting from God knows where. So sorry, yeah. Okay, so I think when it comes down to them kind of making those decisions, I feel like that comes into fact as well. But also the other thing is I feel like the knowledge around the capability and the ability to build on this lacks, because it's how do you expect something to prosper when you don't necessarily push it as much as you wanted to get out there? So Google has a lot of things happening, and it's you pick what fails when you don't push for it. Because they have all this Google Extended I/O and stuff, but they push things that they think is going to be great. But they have all these other things and prototyping, and they want other people to get involved with. And unless I speak to another fellow developer, that's the only way I figure that out. So I don't know if they should bring more awareness around things that they're working on, and they want the community to be more inputty on it and be yeah, we want your input. Please be more, aware of this, and not just in a blog somewhere, but make it more vocal and marketing more aware. I don't know if the developer needs to have our own way of having a marketing, just freaking crispy cereals is advertised to us. They're Google comes up with a net. I don't know, but there needs to be that level of awareness if you want us to help you make this succeed.
Yeah, so I guess we're really just a follow-up question. Actually, if you want to go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you touched on something extremely critical there. Yes, it's really easy to shut down some of these software stuff, but it's also easy to leave them up for a little bit longer. Inbox I absolutely loved Inbox, and it's got shut down, and they told everyone to move to Gmail, and that the feature will be coming to Gmail, but the features aren't quite there in Gmail yet, and Inbox is still would have worked for people. I think there are still some people who actually found a way workaround that made Inbox still run. There's no reason it wasn't like you were losing customers to different products. They could have left Inbox open for another 6 months while they implemented more stuff into Gmail and not piss people off.
I just want to say it feels like we're sort of conflating developer tools with consumer-facing products in terms of what they let live and what they kill. In terms of just purely dev tools that they're putting out, I think some products just die, a lot of open source projects just die because there's low interest or no maintenance or whatever, and Google's guilty of that as well. But they've also done a pretty good job of handling some of the bigger ones and handing them off to the right people. If you think of Kubernetes, when it hit a certain critical scale, they really dispersed it in such a way to be we made this and we have a huge input in it, but it's not just ours anymore. So I think if they did that with more of their, like again, developer tooling and maybe even with some of their consumer products, like that could be a good fix for that.
So I think also the similar fear is there in the Flutter, about the Fluttering community. Like whenever you talk with someone and get excited, if you are excited about Flutter, like they are not, because, and the first reason is like, I don't know if Google's gonna kill it. And so I think that the fear which Google itself is blamed for, like they have created this and the fear is there.
And yet Angular is a safe enterprise option.
Yeah, which I mean, in that ecosystem is kind of like in contrast. It's interesting how that unfolded, because out of like the major web frameworks at this point in time, like as you mentioned, like Angular, a lot of, because Google, again, not an open source thing. The other ones have open source contributions, but Google's the one that manages and maintains that framework. So it's kind of like a bit of role reversal there.
Yeah, like I think it just in general, like not just us with this panel right now, but like in general, people tend to conflate like Google killing projects with their frameworks, and it's not necessarily the same thing. So.
Is this a good question, Todd?
All my questions are good after a few beers. I was going to say, I think the issue too is a lot of projects are getting killed before they reach maturity. Like that's the advantage open source has, is like, look at, take it Linux. Linux in the 90s, a lot of companies would have killed it. But because of open source, it was allowed to continue and reach the maturity that it did. And that's sort of, you know, say what you will, open source
Red Hat
versus
too.
commercial, yeah. But
Red Hat helped.
It did, yeah. Java, you know, Sun, whatever. But I think that's the issue is when you're dealing with commercial versus open source is a lot of commercial, especially when you're dealing with public companies, is it making money now or not? And a lot of these tools, whatever products, die. Whereas with open source, a lot of companies or products can.
Again, how do you make money as on Kubernetes as Google though, or Flutter? Like they don't. Yeah, but like Flutter, they have toolkits for it and they publish packages and they host a lot of stuff. But do they make like money off Flutter itself?
Sells Android devices, makes
Sure.
Android devices more attractive.
Yeah, because indie devs really are popular these days.
Yeah.
But also the comment about the 90s and open source. I mean, no, companies weren't just killing off open source projects willy-nilly in the 90s. You had some major advancement there. You had huge push with OpenOffice. You had Open Solaris, or sorry, not Open Solaris. I think was it just called Solaris, or? And yeah, you had a whole bunch of corporate funded, corporate developed open source projects that were just open source because it seemed to be the best way to develop them. There wasn't a push to kill them off because they're open source. There wasn't a push to kill them off because they weren't profitable. In fact, quite a few of them were profitable, and being open source helped them with that in some ways. So I don't think the killing off open source stuff or killing off projects or maintaining open source projects is something new. It's just kind of continuing on.
I was just reviewing the notes and I can't seem to find the headlines about Wear OS from today's thing. So I guess maybe you forgot to put that in the notes. But it does the lack of mention. So like, does anybody even care? Like, I mean,
I care, but that was in the basement. They didn't.
But also take into consideration that there's 2 more days of I/O.
Right.
You know, this is the first.
Tomorrow's
day.
all about Android Wear.
And there are talks. There's a lot of Stadia stuff. There is stuff on Wear, but it still is telling if it's not even mentioned at all in the keynote.
Is that bad though? I mean, like, what's the scene right now? I guess, like, to my recollection, it's Apple, Fitbit, and Samsung that's running the show. Somehow, Samsung salvaged the market share from Google. No, it's not. Tizen, they have their own operating system now.
So
Pebble comes back.
What Jeff was saying, last year they practically had a Wear OS keynote on day 2, I think it was, and the focus of the Wear OS keynote was, oh, look how well we're doing on iOS devices, which doesn't really instill much confidence for Wear OS with Android. But at the same time, part of it's just lack of hardware availability. No one wants a 28 nanometer A7 processor in a Wear OS device. It's literally a like 2015 chip from mid-range hardware. You don't want that on your wrist. It's not going to have good battery life. It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be what anyone's looking for. And the only companies with faster Wear OS chips available, watch chips available, are Samsung and Apple with their not 28 nanometer devices. And that's not going to change until either Qualcomm or someone else puts out a watch design chip that's actually low power and available to manufacturers beyond Samsung and usable for all the movement tracking and that people want, especially if Google wants to try and implement Project Soli and all that other stuff into it.
I think it's, to be honest, it's kind of disappointing because when I think of wearables, I think of all the health benefits that come to it. Like, I'm about to get my mom an Apple Watch because of all the capabilities that it has, not the surroundings around me, but how much benefit it brings to me as a person, being able to track all this data and stuff that, not even doctors, because you don't have a doctor running with you when you're taking a 10-mile run. You don't have all that stuff. You have a smart watch that does this for you. So to me, I think it's disappointing because Apple has its one device with one operating system in its own little ecosystem. Google, it is an operating system with multiple companies that are, they could really decide, just like they decided, we're going to make a phone, they could do the same thing and be like, we're going to make a watch. So to your point, I get what you're saying, what we have, but I feel like at this point, it's choice. They are prioritizing other things on top of this. But I think that it should be developed side by side, because when you think about machine learning and augmented reality and all these kind of stuff, it's like wearables, just like a phone, will benefit, if not make it completely better, and kill the entire market. So it's very surprising that, there is this amazing trend of health and fitness and meal preps and whatever you have going on, and Google has decided that they don't want to touch it.
So I think that might be also a reason that they realized that it's not actually about the OS. Like, it's not the fancy UI or anything to do with it. It's more like just the health tracking and things like heartbeats and whatever. So it's more like hardware compatibility or hardware issue, which anybody can build. And that's why the Fitbit and other companies. So I think Wear OS did not take off because I think people are not using the UI that much. Like, it's not like people are not using it interactively. It's more like just giving you data out of taking heartbeats and things like that. So I think that's why probably the usage is not there anymore. So it's not a business benefit for them.
I was just gonna say, I can't even remember the last Wear OS smartwatch that I wrote about. I can't think of the last major one that came out. I think it was probably like the Moto 360 second generation or something. So yeah, that's true too. There's a lot of traditional watch manufacturers that are now kind of operating in the space that have taken up that mantle. I think that's one of the issues. Consumers care about what a smartwatch looks like. And any of the Wear OS smartwatches that I have seen released in the last little bit aren't maybe flashy enough for the average person in a way.
What I would be interested in vis-a-vis Wear OS is their whole privacy focus with the keynote is to see what how they're handling the data that comes out of your wearables and where they're processing that and how they're using it and whether or not it's being aggregated for their bigger picture stuff as well. Obviously it ties into Google Fit and all that, and they're going to handle it how they handle it, but there's other stuff that I think they can probably scrape out of that. So it'd be nice to get a shout out tomorrow or whenever the Wear OS part of this is.
Oh no, yeah, the data that Apple could potentially be creating using the ECG in the new Apple Watch would be fantastic for clinical research. There's it's practical application of this, even not on a massive scale, even just local scale for CROs to use Apple Watches to track heart rates more cheaply and more easily and without having to have a chest strap on all the people participating in the study. There's massive practical medical applications for it, and we just don't have enough devices that can do it. We don't have like we could have cheaper devices doing it with actual
I
competition
think
rather than
quality of those results for like EKG type stuff though is still negligible. So again, it's a hardware thing, like you
No,
were saying.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But we need more competition in that space if we want to get to the point where we can actually use it in the way that would actually impact, well, health for everyone in general.
Yeah, so I think it's really a hardware problem, or like basically it's a hardware issue now, and I think Google doesn't want to go into the software side of it because I think it's not useful. Even the ECG thing, I think people will still open their phone and see the ECG report on their big screen phone, not probably hear much because it's a smaller screen.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, though. It's not the ECG itself that matters. It's the data that they'll eventually be able to create using the ECG. You can, with good enough data on heart rate, you can go and predict stuff in advance that I'm not going to get too in depth into this because it gets a little crazy, and we're talking about future medical applications. But there are potential massive benefits to even early prediction for heart attacks and stuff like that. Just being able to have your watch buzz you, telling you that, hey, go sit down somewhere. You might not be feeling so well shortly. Yeah. That would have a massive impact on the health of a huge portion of the population. But we need better hardware to that. We need more research to that. There's so much work that needs to be done, and we need to start now if we actually want to be able to get somewhere with it.
And Google does not want to.
What I think is interesting about this is that there's a lot of passionate conversation happening. It's not, people are concerned and there's skepticism, but generally people want Google to do well, and they want these products to be good, and it's such a large part of all our lives. Even if you just use Gmail, you probably use one Google service and you probably use it a lot. And I like the fact that we had this conversation, that we can, this kind of thing doesn't happen at Google I/O, I'll tell you that much. There's a lot of, it's very pro-Google, and they don't encourage this kind of constructive and critical talk, I'd say. And so on that note, I think that we should wrap this up, and let's give our panel.
That was such a good segue to an ending, Jeff. I'm so impressed.
Let's give a hand to Esther. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say enough Google roasting. We can go now.
Starting to feel bad for Google, you know. So please give a hand to Esther, Jigar, Tamara, Mark, Stephen, Jodie, and Patrick, and everybody who's helped out. We've got Zimmerman in the back there. We've got Solomon. We've got our camera guy, Howard. We've got our venue. We've got Rowan. And thank you, everybody, for making this happen. This will be on YouTube in roughly 6 months, so look for it then. And thank you, everybody. Thank you again.